Whoa, what is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. Hopefully, you guys are enjoying your Victory Wednesday. Got this up a couple of days after I wanted to, but I'm going to kind of combine a couple of topics in this. One of which is going to include the Kayvon Thibodeaux story. Another which is going to include a very interesting story regarding Daniel Jones. I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard about it already, but I kind of want to give you guys my opinion on the whole topic of conversation. In addition to that, I also want to touch on the topic of whether or not the New York Giants should play their starters this week. I think that's a really interesting conversation that Giants fans seem to be back and forth on, and talk about what Daboll had to say. He kind of backtracked a little bit on what he said initially after the game on Sunday. After Sunday, it seemed as if he was full gung-ho that he was going to play everybody. That no longer seems to be the case, but I'll pull up the quote and everything else. Also, I'll be live with Patricia Traina, I believe tomorrow, depending on Bad Dog's schedule. And, of course, I'll be live with Bad Dog. Plan on going live a lot leading up to the playoffs with you guys. We're going to have a lot to talk about. Hopefully, you guys, like I said, are enjoying the New York Giants' first playoff berth since 2016. But let's get on with the topics. The first thing I'm going to touch on is this week's game against the Philadelphia Eagles. And for all intents and purposes, in terms of the playoffs, in terms of seeding, it means absolutely nothing. The New York Giants cannot move up. They cannot move down. This is identical to the same exact scenario that the New York Giants were in 2007. The last time that they won their Super Bowl. Of course, the circumstances are a bit different, but the Giants at that point in time, I believe they were the 5 seed, were locked into the 5 seed. They couldn't drop to the 6, and they couldn't move up to the 4. And they decided to play all their starters in a game that meant nothing in terms of the playoff seeding. Of course, that was going up against the undefeated Patriots. So a bit different, right? You were trying to defy history. Here, you're going up against your heated division rival, the Philadelphia Eagles, who have everything to play for, and the New York Giants don't. But you could certainly make an argument as to why, at least I feel, they should play their starters to at least a certain extent. And I'll give my full opinion throughout all of this. First off, the Eagles are our arch rival. So as a fan, I would love to see the New York Giants knock the Philadelphia Eagles out of the number 1 seed. Because if the 49ers were to win, the Cowboys wouldn't even get the number 1 seed. The 49ers would, being that they own the tiebreaker over the Dallas Cowboys. And the Cowboys would seemingly get the 2. So neither team would get a bye. So you would hurt, both of our divisional rivals. Well, more so the Philadelphia Eagles. But I think from a Giants standpoint, I think it could have at least a somewhat similar effect to what it did when we went on our Super Bowl run in 2007. And by no means am I saying that we're going to the Super Bowl. But if you're going up against a team like the Eagles, if the New York Giants were able to go toe-to-toe, even if they didn't win that game, that could build a ton of confidence going into the playoffs, not to mention the offense is really starting to click. I don't know how much I want to disrupt that. So it's an interesting decision this week for Brian Daboll regarding, who he's going to play, who's not going to play. I would guess anybody that's questionable is not going to play. Leonard Williams probably won't play. Azeez Ojulari probably won't play. Adoree Jackson, I would guess, wouldn't play. Now, you may want to get him in there a little bit just so he gets a little bit of game rep, knowing that you're going to need him for the playoffs, and he hasn't played him forever if he's good to go. But my guess is he probably won't play. Anybody that's questionable. However, anybody that is not questionable, Daniel Jones, so on and so forth, I'd expect to play. Now, if the game gets out of hand, you pull them. If the Giants are down by 3 scores in the second quarter, maybe you make the move. Maybe you bring in Tyrod Taylor. But think about the confidence that this could build going into the playoffs. If coming off the way that they've played the last 2 weeks, if you were able to give a good match against the Philadelphia Eagles, I do think it could build something going into the postseason, especially with the way we've played, like I said, the last couple of weeks. In terms of what Brian Daboll had to say regarding the matchup, I'd say we'll talk about it and go with what's best for the team. So it's early Monday. This was 2 days ago. We'll go out there and try to have a good week of practice. Prepare like we normally do and decide what we want to do relative to who's playing, who's not playing. Whatever we think is best for our team, that's what we'll end up doing, Daboll said. So if you guys listen to the post-game, and I don't have the quotes in front of me, if you listen to the post-game press conference after the game, when people asked him about if the starters are going to play, he said, yeah, this is the fun part of the season. This is, they're going to play. Sounded like in that quote, he kind of backtracked a little bit. So what I take out of that is I think some of the starters are going to play, and I think anybody that's remotely questionable will not. Maybe Saquon Barkley will play, but maybe he'll have a limited, maybe he'll only get 6, 7, 8 carries. Maybe they'll have like an even distribution in the backfield. They'll try to rest him up for the playoffs. But we'll see. It'll be really interesting to see what the New York Giants decide. I think Jones will probably get the start. He's still building chemistry with guys like Hodge and so on and so forth, but maybe not. And no matter what he decides, I'm not going to flip out one way or the other. I completely understand the other side of the coin. You don't want anybody to get hurt going into the playoffs, the biggest game we've had since 2016. So I understand both sides of the argument, but I do think there is some value in playing this game, especially if the New York Giants could go toe-to-toe. And if they do get a little, if the game is getting out of hand, you pull them quick. You say, all right, rest up. We didn't have all our guys in there. Don't lose confidence. We weren't we weren't evenly matched here. We'll rest up. We'll get ready for the playoffs. But it'll be really interesting to see what Daboll decides to do in the end. But again, I expect a lot of the questionable guys to sit out. Now, I want to touch on a topic regarding Daniel Jones. What else would it be if we can't talk about the quarterback at some point in time? I think at this point, it's clearly obvious that most people feel he's coming back. I felt that for a while, and the last couple of weeks have only cemented that. It's just a matter of what the contract's going to be, what the financial commitment's going to be. This came out, I believe his name is Tyler Dunne. Should have got the name right, but I know his last name is Dunn. He was actually on Patricia Traina's channel. And I think he writes for the Bills, but he has written stories for the New York Giants in the past, if I recall. But he came out with a really interesting story regarding some of the sources that he has from within inside the New York Giants organization regarding Daniel Jones. And I think it really speaks to how good of a head coach Brian Daboll is. But here's some of the quotes. He wanted Daniel Jones to deal with adversity, the source explained. He wanted to see how he dealt with it on a daily basis, and he passed it with flying colors. So I know he loves Daniel Jones. He loves Daniel Jones. He loves him. Practices are always scripted. Daboll would tell defensive coordinator Don Wink Martindale which plays he'd be running when Jones was in the game. This source explains, and had Martindale call defensive plays that intentionally work. And when Taylor entered, the exact opposite. Plays were scripted on both sides to set him up for success. And I know Julian Love went on WFAN and said that they didn't know the plays. That doesn't necessarily mean that this is not true. They didn't have to know the plays, but Wink may have known the offensive plays and set his defense up to be successful against Daniel Jones. Jones did not flinch. Daboll was thrilled. Daboll's got great X's and O's, said the source. We know that. But that's where Daboll is different than the rest of the New England coaches. He's got a better feel for people. He's more of a man's man than the other coaches we've seen come out of there. So basically, if this is true coming out from Dunn, Brian Daboll from the start of training camp, and you remember, you saw all these reporters at training camp talking about how good of a job Tyrod Taylor was doing, how bad of a job Daniel Jones was doing. That was scripted. Brian Daboll intentionally did that, if this is accurate, to try to test the mental fortitude of Daniel Jones. And if that is true, that is incredible. And I thought about this yesterday. If all of this is true, I think it's entirely possible that they intentionally went out of their way to bring in Tyrod Taylor. Not to say that he wasn't a good pickup. I think he's a sound backup. But they had to know the fact that he was in Buffalo. The fact that he had some credentials would bring some fire behind Daniel Jones and some added pressure, because that would come with the added pressure of the media and parts of the fan base talking about, they brought in Tyrod Taylor. He came from Buffalo. There's ties. And just to draw up extra pressure for Daniel Jones. That's just speculation on my part. But if that's true, a hell of a job by Brian Daboll and a hell of a job by Daniel Jones. You've seen him flourish in pressure situations this year, and he's come up big all year. And it looks to me, if you look at some of the post-game press conferences and some of the videos that came out after the fact in the locker room, Brian Daboll is a huge Daniel Jones fan. Like I said, it's just a matter of what the contract's going to be. I fully expect it back at the end of the year. But I just thought that was a really interesting story, and it just really goes to show you how thoughtful and how out of the box Brian Daboll is. The more and more I hear about Brian Daboll, the more and more I'm a fan. I think at the end of the year, he should win Coach of the Year. And I think it's trending towards that he will. We'll see at the end of the year, though, regardless whether or not he gets the hardware. He's done a tremendous job. The next thing I want to touch on was the Kayvon Thibodeaux thing. And this seems to be like a big story now the last couple of days. Of course, I was at the game. We saw what happened. We'll talk about it after the quote. But Kayvon Thibodeaux, the snow angel, after Nick Foles went down with the injury. And I'll talk further in detail about it. This is what Kayvon Thibodeaux had to say. I didn't pull up Jeff Saturday's quote. But Jeff Saturday basically came out and attacked Kayvon Thibodeaux for the way he handled the situation. I don't remember his exact wording, but he went at him, and he didn't hide his words. He definitely went out Kayvon Thibodeaux, and this is what Thibodeaux had to say in response. I don't know who he is, Thibodeaux said via SNY. Anybody who comments on it, unless I know who they are, it doesn't really affect me. And I saw a lot of fans on Twitter kind of take this, I think, out of context. When Kayvon Thibodeaux says that, I don't think he's saying, like, I understand why some people would interpret it this way, but I don't think Kayvon Thibodeaux is saying, like, he doesn't know who he is. Like, obviously he knows who Jeff Saturday is. He's the head coach of the Indianapolis Colts. Everybody knows that. It's all over ESPN. When he got the job, everything else. I think what he means by that when he says that is he's never met him. He's never talked to him. He doesn't know him on a personal level. Doesn't know him from his playing days when he played in the NFL for the Colts. That's the way that I interpret that. I don't think he's saying that he doesn't know who he is. Yeah, that's the way I look at it. And he's basically saying, I don't really care what he thinks about me. I don't know the guy. He doesn't mean anything to me. Then he later went on to say, Thibodeaux was also asked if anyone from the Giants spoke to him about handling things differently after asking about what he would handle differently and being told the celebration. Thibodeaux said no, and that he will continue to play with high emotion and high adrenaline. Then he said, what am I supposed to do now? Every time I sack a quarterback, stop and look and help him up. You don't play the game for anybody to get injured, but I play defense. Thibodeaux said, they brought me here to be a savage and to take over the game and to impact the game. We preach the impacting the game is affecting the quarterback. That's what I'm here to do. And obviously, I understand, especially with everything that happened in the Buffalo Bills game last night, and hopefully he pulls through and everything works out there. But I understand, especially in light of that, why some people would be a little bit sensitive to some of the words that he said. I'm sure he could have handled it better. In terms of his on-field celebration, the way that I took the Angels celebration, I honestly, in my heart, think that was adrenaline-based. I think that was his celebratory sack. And emotions took over, adrenaline took over, and I don't even think he realized in the moment of that celebration that Foles was hurt. I think he realized after the fact, and when he was out on the sideline, that is not a good look. The falling asleep thing that I think people said that Steph Curry normally does that. Regardless of what his intentions were or not, I could certainly understand the optics of that. And he could have handled this better. Make no mistake about that. And hopefully Brian Daboll talked to him. Am I going to come down on him? No. He's a rookie. Like he said, he's a defensive player. It's a violent sport. His job is to hit the quarterback as hard as he possibly can every play. And when he does, he's going to celebrate. Now, like I said, if he knew he was hurt, of course that's a bad look. I don't want any players of mine doing that. And I would completely understand any Colts fans that take exception to that. I'd completely understand the coach and the players. So I'm not coming down on Jeff Saturday. I'm not coming down on anything any of the Colts fans did, because we got to be honest with ourselves, Giants fans. If, Tank Lawrence did that to Daniel Jones, we'd be just as upset. But at the same time, I could understand, adrenaline took over, and I honestly don't believe that he was celebrating that he hurt the opposing quarterback. But his off-the-field stuff after the fact, yeah, I think that could have been handled a bit better. That's just my take on it. Everybody's going to have their own opinion. Some people are going to say he was completely out of line from the start. Regardless, I'm thrilled that Kayvon Thibodeaux is a New York Giant. At the end of the day, he's a beast, and I think he's only going to get better. Hopefully he learns from this. Hopefully this isn't a reoccurring thing. If things like this happen, I do want to see him, knock a lot of quarterbacks on their ass. Not that I'm saying I'm hoping for quarterbacks to get injured, but in the future, maybe don't brag as much if the opposing quarterback has to get rolled off on a car. And I know football is a violent game. So otherwise you're going to hear it from the media. But it is what it is. I'm not coming down on Thibodeaux. I still love him. I'm wearing his jersey. Still support Kayvon, but could have been handled a bit better. And I certainly understand why the optics don't look very good, especially with what happened on Monday night. But just wanted to give you guys my opinion on that briefly, touch on everything else. Like I said, I'll be live with Patricia Traina and Bad Dog probably tomorrow, if not the day after that. Appreciate all you guys. Thank you guys for all the support. Can't wait to talk New York Giants football with you the next couple of weeks. As always, guys, if you like what you watch, please subscribe. Drop a comment. Maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.